Imagination is something that allows me as an artist to call information from the past, find a link to it that links past to present, present to future. And it's also about taking ownership of narrative. And within that premise, I see the act of imagination as a fundamentally political stance. That particular image of the feminine form with no head and it's self-rooted has so much resonance. That image still signifies the expunging of the feminine from histories, from religions, from cultures, from our political discourse. The notion of globe as the body and Africa as its heart had deep resonance for me, and I wanted to bring that idea into the mosaic mural. Art can engage the heart, and heart functions as a filter for pursuit of truth. The complexity of beauty is that it can be awe-inspiring, sensorial, sublime. The tension between craft and meaning is almost essential to imagination. Portraiture, too, is like a motif. It's not about a person or a personality. The figure and its skeletal counterpart are about life and death, imagination and lack of imagination. Quintuplet effect plays with this tuplet notation in music. I was thinking of density and layering, packing and unpacking. There are 5 ideas or notes compressed in this work. There is reference to American capitalism through my painting The Big Ritz. Then there's the spiritual dimension, portrait of stasis, portrait of Adam Smith, and an outline of one of the historic Mirage paintings. There is history and then there's storytelling happening in both the works, especially on ideas around redaction. Then there's the perception of authority, there's power hierarchies, independence. What is freedom? What is freedom, especially within the economic global patterns that link all humans? Creativity has no national, racial, or religious boundaries. It is the power of imagination that fosters new discourse and creates new frontiers. With imagination comes humility and inventiveness.
So the images from this amazing artist show the human perspective. And one question that comes up a lot when we're talking about AI, when we're talking about entrepreneurship, is it just again about results? I think we were hearing earlier from the ILO about the human dimension and social protection. How do you actually guarantee that when you're focused on just reaching more people, on all of this effectiveness, are you still in touch with that human dimension? And are you actually, on some level, when you're getting this automated feedback which seems so personalized, how do you actually keep the connection with the individuals at hand? And I'd like to just ask Charles, because I know you work with young people in your lab, in your space. Do you ever get actual feedback about how these new technologies are being played out, about how people are able to actually integrate them into their own trajectories in life?
One of the things that we do is we host coding classes for a lot of people learning how to do website development, app development, things of that nature. And for a lot of people, it's actually free for the community. It's subsidized through foundation money. And it is very personal for some of them, because some of them, they either, they wanted to start their own business, or some of them are kind of career transition people and they're looking into like entrepreneurship. And they wouldn't necessarily have, $10,000 to go to, a coding class to understand, to learn some of this coding language. So, and it gives them a sense of value, like, okay, now I understand, now I know. And it's also bridging that gap between, like, you know, you have a lot of these jobs, whether they're, you know, engineering jobs, you know, whether it's at Google or it's at, you know, Airbnb or some of these other companies where they wouldn't necessarily have these kind of skills, and we provide some of that skill set for them, so now they can actually go and get some of these jobs. So it's kind of more economic development, it's kind of more, you know, social impact, and then, you know, also some of that the sustainability piece that we have with our eco-friendly businesses as well. So, and then also just kind of like we're redefining manufacturing with our makerspace. So, and that's part of it as well.
We have in the room a woman, Cyndie, who's been doing great work with homeless children in the city, introducing them to actual museums and fine arts programs. Could you share just a little bit on that point? How do you find your interaction with kids who in this case are living in some of the most traumatic circumstances? How do you make that connection happen? And in your experience, of course, you're dealing specifically with the arts. Here we're hearing about other types of learning. Do you see any point of commonality? Are these kids able to take that and integrate that and have other opportunities open to them, or is it very relative?
I think it's actually not relative at all. And I made myself a note during your beautiful AI presentation about the lack of focus after a certain number of minutes. And one of the things I'm thinking about a lot right now is what you've turned the conversation to, which I like to call the deep human. Because I'm beginning, as I'm looking at the way the kind of work that we do, which I'll talk about in 1 minute, integrates with technology, which I think is really a necessary part of 21st century education and absolutely necessary in at-risk communities, but it cannot replace the really deep human element, because that is something, it's particularly in at-risk communities, that can often be missing. So in order to have people who have, you know, I was just thinking about this as this conversation was going on. You think about someone like an Emmanuel Axe or some really major musician, anything that goes on in a conservatory is hand to hand. So it's one person to one person. And that is the element that creates greatness. So if we reduce everything to simply technology, then we eliminate we minimize the possibility of greatness, because greatness is something that is really transmitted. It's a kind of genetic thing. So what happens in these communities, just the very quick outline of the program, which is called the TimeIn Children's Arts Initiative, is the recreation of a program that I made for my daughter in 1997, which became Best of New York. It's an introduction to high art aesthetics for little kids. See, I'm talking really fast too. And it was an integration of opera through hands-on art, alternating with museum visits and gallery hops, specializing in 20th and 21st century art. So it's very recherché, very, you know, elite. But not elite at all. It's extremely, you know, if you think about what the art forms are. I mean, I grew up as a lower middle class girl in New York City, which people don't know, but you know, it's the way people express themselves, and the way they find their voice is through the way they express themselves. So I created this program for my daughter. It became Best of New York in 2000. Everybody from David Bowie, Hugh Jackman, Andy Lieberman, Mort Zuckerman, Rupert Murdoch, everybody came to this fabulous private program because it's pretty much the best thing in the world, and people are still coming from all over the world to the private program.
At what point did you manage to get homeless children
involved?
Well,
in 2005, I asked one of my very wealthy people who had been in the program for a long time. I said, you know, I've been scholarshiping kids, and now what we need to do is we need to get this program to kids who could never come, because their parents are not saying, oh, my child needs opera and art. They're saying, where am I sleeping tonight? And so we went to, I'll just say, I won't say who it is, a very big patron of the arts, and I met with her and the ED of her foundation, and I said, look, I want to create the exact same program, not a poor kids program. I want it to be exactly the same as it was for my daughter, for all these other children of privilege. And in order to do that, the only way you can do that with children who are in such high-risk situations is it has to happen during the school day, as part of their school day, because the arts need to take pride of place. They can't be like,
so it was integrated
fun.
In the curriculum.
Integrated into the curriculum as part of the school day, but it also has to take place not in the school, because it has to take place in my studio or out in museums and galleries the same way as other children do it, because how else will they have the same experience?
And thank you, Cyndie. And on that particular note of not having a different caliber just because somebody can't afford it, I'd like to ask if Matt is in the room, because are you? Okay, here you are. Because speaking about something that connects everyone, again, we're going to jump now. We've been talking about humans, but humans don't exist in a vacuum. We rely on a number of complex interactions. And Matthew is an artist who works with communities all around the world, but through the lens of bees. And why this connects back to everything that we're talking about here is something that we'll get to in a moment. Matt.
Are you gonna? Hey, my name is Matt Willey, and I am an artist and the founder of the Good of the Hive initiative. And I am hand painting 50,000 individual honeybees in murals around the world. This started because I met a honeybee on the floor of my apartment in New York City, and I connected with her. I mean, it's as simple as that. An artist got on the floor and got a magnifying glass and stared at a honeybee, and I never had done that before in my life. And what I found out was after about 2 minutes and about 3 hours without a text and without anything, I put her out in the backyard after she died, and I came inside and I started Googling honeybees. And I came across colony collapse disorder. This was about 9 years ago when I knew nothing about anything that was going on with honeybees, and it blew me away. There was this giant mystery. And then I came across a behavior called altruistic suicide, that when a honeybee feels sick, if it's in the hive, it will exit the hive and fly off into the abyss for the good of the hive. And that's where the name of the initiative came from 9 years later. I've been painting murals for over 25 years. All high-end interior stuff and sports arenas, but I had never done anything with the environment or anything like that. And it took about 7 years, and someone sent me a video of the giant wall of a honey company in the middle of Florida and said, you should paint bees. It was a friend of mine and said, you should paint bees on this wall. And because I was starting to get into painting them, and I said, yeah, I should. And so I called them up and I asked them if they would like a mural of honeybees on their wall. And they said, we would love a mural of honeybees. We have no money, and there's no money in this town, and you will not get any money. And murals are illegal in this town. And I said, okay, I'm getting a little old for running from the cops. So if you get the law changed, I'll figure out a way to do it. And it took about 2 months. I didn't think they'd ever do it. And they did it. They called me up and said, we're ready. Come on and paint this mural. So there I was, a 10-week project. I raised about $500 from friends for gas money, and I just went. And when I got there, someone put me up in their RV for free for 10 weeks. The coffee shop in town gave me free breakfast and free coffee every day for 10 weeks. But the restaurants in town started giving me free food and free salad bar whenever I wanted it. But at the end result, I figured out that what happened was everyone came together to have this happen based on the moment of faith I took. That leap, like the bee.
Well, and why I think this example is very interesting is because we're talking about different ways in which people learn and different things that people learn. And the question that's in my mind is, how many of us in the room in the last month or so remember an experience of learning in a way that stayed with us? You know, do we stop learning once we leave the school? Many of us are having to constantly reinvent ourselves professionally, financially, and so on. But are we still learning, or are we just going about it with our old learning, which is antiquated for most of us who are not the age of the hackathon winners and the students here? You mentioned, Raf, that you have a lot of adult education and people who are coming at different points in time. When you hear these examples, which are conceivably very far away from this formal private education, do you see any opportunities for integrating or exposing students who may be looking to go into business to the creative process? Because going back to Emile, who's now standing in the corner, we have different ways of processing information and different biases. I am certainly not a neuroscientist, but I wonder if we were exposed to other ways of thinking more regularly, might we not be predisposed to come up with better solutions and more functional societies?
Yes, I guess our experience is the fact that we are now a leader worldwide in art and design, applied arts and design. That's where I'm seeing a lot more ability of people to obviously from art, applied arts really, not art, pure art, that they do go out and seek opportunities. They are they were born to be entrepreneurs almost. So I'm seeing a lot of having been exposed to them, a lot of people go and generate their own jobs with a few friends. Some do go and work for the big houses. They have the ability to do that, but I'm seeing, to answer your question directly, in the applied arts, there's a consciousness out there that you can get a good job if you invest the time in art, moving to applied arts, to design, to fashion and so on. So I see more of that. The more traditional subjects that most people do have, if you're middle class, lower middle class, is business. That's been the bread and butter to create a job for yourself. But it's obviously a little bit more staid than the other. So to answer your question directly, that's where I see more young people, including these people who they may think of themselves as business, but they are really in the design field in many ways. Okay, so that's where I see the opportunities.
This may sound heretical in this room, but it goes back a little bit to what Emile said earlier about, digital marketers maybe don't know what they're doing to people. Back to you. I mean, this technique you have, which is going to, quote, discourage people from texting and this and that, I mean, ultimately that is a direct collision course with the utilization of the device. So at what point does that get locked? Does that, is there an escape mechanism or an avoidance that gets built into the device so you don't necessarily respond any longer to the AI? Will Apple block what you're trying to do?
I will tell you that when they will do it. Yes, maybe, but I can't answer now. The only thing that I would like to add, I went to Sulawesi a couple of years ago. Can you imagine that tomorrow with artificial intelligence, a guy will pay $100,000 for a class at Harvard, but at the same time, tomorrow, 100,000 people from Sulawesi Island will pay only $1, but will coach with an artificial intelligence. They will just see the same video of the class. This is all the stakes of the artificial intelligence.